There are definitely people who have met the Fulweilers and who would probably be like, do not listen to them on education because I asked their 7th grader about Thomas Jefferson and they didn't know. It is Jen Fulweiler here with another by request video about our education system that I affectionately call Joeschooling. It was developed by my husband, Joe. I am a stand-up comic. He is an attorney. We have 6 kids. And this system came about, a little bit about his background. He was raised by a single mother, ended up going to Yale, Columbia, and Stanford. And so he's always been interested in the subject of education. And so one of the things that we've said in other videos is when he looked at the traditional homeschooling models, this was not something that a single mother could do. And so he always wanted to develop a model that anyone could use regardless of their life circumstances. That is how we came up with this Joeschooling model. So in a previous video, we did an overview of what this looks like. I will link to it in the notes so that you can look that up. But I know that a lot of people are going to have questions about the subject-driven philosophy. So that's what we're going to talk about in a little bit of detail here. So, okay, I know that people will feel like they're not even tracking with us because this is so different than the traditional education model. So for our kids, especially as they get into junior high, high school, but really at every age, they pretty much, when you look at what they do in a given day, they are focused on one subject at a time. Is that correct?
True.
And why craft it that way?
Because it allows, I think it's more efficient. I think if you just sit down and focus on something for a couple of weeks or a month, it's better than taking, let's say you spend 40 hours in a week, right? And let's say it takes you 2 weeks to learn something. So that's 80 hours. Well, I think it's better to spend the 80 hours consecutively than to do 1 hour a day for 80 days. I just think, you're going to end up needing more than 80 hours. You're going to need 100 or 120 because the first 5 minutes of every hour, every day is going to be recalling what you knew yesterday. And by the time you get to the end of your learning process, you're so far away, temporally speaking, in terms of time, that you've probably forgotten some stuff that you learned. So I just think it's more efficient, I guess is the shortest way to say it. I think it all, can I say one other thing? I think it also exposes issues better. So, if we're in a biology mindset and my kids are just getting stuck on something, it's pretty clear because they just stop making progress. Whereas if they're learning 8 things, maybe they just kind of skip that and they kind of work on other stuff. But it's like it's easier for things to get lost in the mix. But if it's one thing they're studying, I think it's more likely to surface issues. And
let me jump in to say that to share with you guys just a little bit personally about my background, to give you a concrete example of why I think this works and why I think I really think it's revolutionary, this idea of doing subject-driven learning in his Joeschooling system. Is one of the things that people often comment about me is that I've done a few different careers. So I did writing and I have some books, and then radio, and then stand-up comedy. All of these have a massive learning curve. When I wrote I wrote 2 memoirs. One was, let's face it, a memoir about writing a memoir. Who does that? So I wrote 2 memoirs and then a more like kind of traditional how-to book. For each one, that is a massive learning curve. And you remember when I was writing my first book, learning how to write narrative, because writing a memoir is similar to writing a fiction book in the sense that you have to keep the story going, have a plot, that sort of thing. Enormous learning curve. You saw how it
was crazy.
Yeah, and that was in the midst of having 6 babies in 8 years. It was craziness. And then I went into radio. Enormous learning curve, doing talk radio live 2 hours a day, no co-host. You can imagine that's a lot to learn. And then more recently, I've gone into stand-up comedy, which honestly, I said that's been like the biggest learning curve of all. Like that's very hard to learn how to do that well. So if I had tried to do all of those things at once. By the way, before that, there was just the learning curve of just learning kind of how to be a mom, how to do mom stuff. We're both only children. I had no idea what we're doing with all these babies. So there was that learning curve. And imagine if I had tried to do all that at once. If you talked to me and I was like, oh yes, right now I am trying to be an excellent author and an excellent talk radio host and an excellent stand-up comic, and I'm pursuing that all at once. Well, you'd say, Jen, you're insane. You're not going to be able to be great at any of those things because your mind is too divided. But we do that with kids all the time. In the school system, we're expecting them to be learning chemistry and algebra 2 or calculus. And it's weird that in the adult world, we recognize that would be insane to have an adult trying to get up 5 learning curves at once. But we do it with our kids all the time, right?
Yeah, and I think sometimes one subject, can help you with another subject if you do them in the right order. That's another reason to do it. And the other reason I think you do it subject by subject, that you should do it subject by subject, is it allows more tailoring and, to what the kids' skills are and what their interests are. So we always let our kids choose which subject they want to attack, in which order. And if it's something they really love, we can pile on a little bit more so they can go a little bit deeper. And if it's something they really hate, we can take a little bit off and just make sure they understand what they need to understand and then move on. So you can do a lot of tailoring if you do it subject by subject.
Yeah. So walk us through about how long this typically takes. Obviously, this varies by grade level. Let's pick something kind of in the middle. Let's say an 8th grader. Well, actually, let's do this. What does an 8th grade year look like for a kid in subject-driven, this Joeschooling format of education? How many weeks are they spending? Like, just walk us through, give us a specific example.
Okay, I just want to say 7th grade math is usually the hardest thing that any of these kids ever do because they're hitting like algebra and all this stuff and they're still pretty young. Our kids are usually hitting that around 10, age 10. So like it's kind of understanding y equals mx plus b at age 10 is a little bit tricky. So, but 8th grade is usually pretty easy because the 8th grade materials are not that much more advanced than 7th grade. So how long does it take to get through? Again, for 8th grade, we use subject guides called Spectrum, and we do all the regular subject, science, math, English, language arts, history. So they go through 4 or 5 of these little Spectrum books. They're each maybe 120 pages, something like that, and they have a test at the end. And then they use the Harcourt yellow cover 8th grade test review book, which has a test in it that covers all the 8th grade stuff. So what is that? You're looking at about maybe 6 books that are all about 150 pages each on average, let's say. So if what does that add up to? Let's call it 800 pages. And if they're doing, let's call it 900 pages, because then if they do 30 pages a day, that means it's going to take them about 30 days to get through it. And there are only 20 work days in a month, right? 4 weeks, 5 days a week. So in theory, it should take them about a month and a half to get through 8th grade. Now,
and that's for a pretty hard subject,
now let's say, well, that's a grade. That's all subjects in 8th grade. So it never takes a month and a half. It'll always take longer than that because that would assume that they just breeze through everything. They can do their full 30 pages. It's never like that. There are always things that they get stuck on and they have to go do some research on YouTube or they have to come and ask questions of me or Jen or, whomever. And then there are days that, they're sick or like we're traveling or something. So realistically, they end up doing a grade every 3 months, something like that. And then, so it's not uncommon. If everything goes well, we can have a kid do 3 grades in 1 calendar year. But it doesn't always work that way.
Well, and again, like our oldest kids wanted to go to high school for the socialization, and it worked. I mean, we said in a previous video, it was a rough transition in terms of it's just a whole different system, but grades are very good in AP classes. I mean, it works to do it this way. And by the way, we're not, another thing I don't think we've said yet in this series, that we're not like obsessed with one-upping, like my kid is doing calculus when they're 4 years old, like that. We're not, we're not saying that we can go through 3 grades in a year to like one-up anyone. Our kids are geniuses. It's
no. Any kid could do that. I mean,
we're really about, it's like efficiency. Efficient use of time is our goal.
Yeah, I mean, they're trade-offs and everything, right? And the trade-off that we're making to get that kind of, speeding through the basics is just kind of restricting. Like for example, you can go buy a curriculum for 5th grade science that is 800 pages by itself. Everything they're going to learn in there is going to be very basic, and they're going to learn it all again when they get to high school and they do biology, chemistry, physics, right? And I like to do statistics as an elective in high school. So, and pretty much everything, so I'm not a fan of these like deep, huge science books for 5th graders. All right, so we're cutting a lot of that out. And that's the trade-off we're making. And that's why they can run through this stuff. Now, once they get past the 8th grade material, which 8th grade is usually what, like 13-year-olds? Our kids usually finish that around 11, so it's like 2 years early. But again, we have cut out a lot of material, and then we make them do the GED as like just to make sure they really know it. So we add more stuff in there. So it's like we really just focus on reading, writing, arithmetic, and a little bit more, but we're really just pounding in the basics, and you can do that pretty quickly. That's the trade-off.
And so when
for K through 8, and then we go deep in the subjects in the high school.
I just want to make sure we've hit so you said that they could do, if things are going well, they can do the basics of a grade in 3 months, but walk us through, like, how many days and weeks are they spending on geometry? How many days and weeks are they spending on like physics or whatever?
Yeah, okay, so if we're talking about 8th grade, the books are, again, they're like, there's a book for language arts. It's about 120 pages. So in theory, if they're doing 30 pages a day, they should be able to go through that in 4 days. But then they still have to study for and take a test. There's like a little sample test at the end of each of the spectrum books. And so, they should be able to go through the language arts book in a week. They never do. It's always going to be more like 2 weeks. Some days they may do 30 pages. That's the goal, but a lot of times they do 10, or maybe they do 0 for one of the reasons I described earlier. So let's say it takes a couple weeks to get through the book, through the pages, the learning pages of the Spectrum English Language Arts book. Then they'll probably spend a day taking one of the practice tests, and then the next day grading it and looking at what they got wrong and going back and figuring out why they got it wrong and memorizing and learning and creating a cheat sheet. Then the next day they'll take the final test for English Language Arts Spectrum book, and then the next day they'll grade it, figure out what they got wrong. So, it's a couple weeks probably just to do the English portion. And it's, similarly, math usually always takes longer. Math, it seems like the best we ever do is 10 pages a day. And there's always more questions and more YouTube videos and more practice work. But the history, they probably do about the same as the English. So probably a couple weeks, the history book. I'm talking about the Spectrum books here. And then what's the last one? So it's history, English, and science. So then, there's 8th grade science, which is kind of a smattering of different, scientific concepts. That probably also, that's the science books at grade level at K through 8 they're more like English or history books than they are like science textbooks that you would see in college or high school, because there's just kind of like, you read some stuff and you answer some questions, like what is chlorophyll, right? It's more like almost like reading comprehension, but that probably is another 2 weeks. The math book, again, always takes the longest. So to get through the Spectrum books, we're probably looking at a couple of months right there. And then they have to go do the yellow Harcourt 8th grade test prep book. And that's probably another 2 or 3 weeks.
And so this is just an example from junior high. It looks a little different at each grade level. Again, we have another video that I'll link in the comments where we go through in a little more detail what it looks like, big picture, K through 12. This is more just drilling down on the idea that I think is revolutionary of subject-driven schooling, which is kind of the core of the Joeschooling model. And what about, I know that people are wondering about retention, that if you're just doing language arts the first few weeks of the semester, and then the next few weeks is just deep chemistry, you're kind of only doing chemistry. Are the kids going to remember that 2 years out?
Yeah, because, you know, a well-designed curriculum, which we're keying off of books that are based on curricula that have been created by educators around the country. So I don't know exactly which curriculum or set of curricula the Spectrum books use, or the BrainQuest books use, or Harcourt uses, but I am sure that they're looking at several, state education agency approved curricula, right, to come up with what is the 8th grade, set of knowledge that you need. And in a well-designed set of curricula, the 8th grade stuff is going to repeat and include the 7th grade stuff, and so on down. So if you miss something in 1st grade, like how to spell there, THEIR versus THERE, you're going to hit that again, in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 5th grade. I mean, at some point you're going to discover that you don't know that. And so, I don't worry that much about them, missing some little something here or there.
Yeah, and I found, in general in life, I think our brains are designed this way. You retain what you need to retain, and you retain what you're interested in and what is useful. And if you did learn something that no future subjects ever reference, and it never comes up in your life, and it's not an interest area, once you pass the test, do you really need to know it? So one of the things that you get with this system is that there is forward progress. It just feels like things are moving forward.
And yeah, it's really all about forward progress, because as long as you're moving forward, you stay sane, the kids stay sane, the kids don't feel like failures. And we've even gone so far as to sometimes if a kid's struggling with a particular subject, like I mentioned earlier, 7th grade math is a very common one. Sometimes we'll say, let's forget math for 7th grade. Let's just go on to 8th grade. And then we'll do math last in 8th grade. And when we get to 8th grade math, then we'll do 7th grade math. We'll just do them together. And that has worked very well. And there have been a couple of times, usually around 7th grade math, that they're just getting blocked, and they're blocked, and they're blocked. And I have had to sit down with them and be, a kid, or we have 2 kids that are kind of tracking at the same level for a while. And I have had to sit down with them and be like, all right, today is math day. All we are going to do is review basic math concepts and do worksheets and do examples until you guys get this. We have, and one time it took 2 days. So I did, and you could, if you're working Monday through Friday, which I was, but I had to kind of clear off some time here and there. You could do it on a weekend though. And usually after about 2 or 3 hours, they're exhausted. And they become very motivated to get this stuff, because they're like, all right, I do not want to sit here and drill on this stuff for hours every day. So there are times when you have to break through things, but forward progress is the name of the game.
And I will say, we talked in another video, again, I'll link to these other videos in the notes. We talked in another one about motivation, how just having a big life vision keeps kids motivated. But another thing about the Joeschooling system that keeps kids motivated is when they're on a subject they love, it's fun to do subject-driven, one subject at a time education, because they can just tear through it and they just keep making progress. And they can be way ahead of their peers in that subject. Or on the other hand, if it's a subject they just hate, they're motivated because they know once I can just get to the point that I can take this freaking test, I'm done with it, and I don't have to go back to this subject for a while, and it'll come up the next year in the next grade.
Yeah.
But it'll just feel so good to be done with it. And so even for kids who are not naturally motivated, they'll get motivated if that's what it takes to have algebra out of their lives.
Yeah, and there have been times that I've had a kid in a particular subject, and I kind of knew that they didn't really completely get this subject, like say in 6th grade, say a 6th grade social studies or something, or history, and I just passed them anyway, because I knew they were going to hit it again in 7th grade, and they would be a year older, their brain would be more mature, and they would have learned a lot more about the world in the interim. And it never mattered, you know? So
you're saying it worked out
Yeah.
when you just waited and came back to it
you
later
don't
when
need-
they're more mature.
Yeah, you don't want to get like too hung up on any of the details. I mean, as long as they're trying and learning and making progress, just keep making progress. It all works out.
The final thing I want to touch on about this Joeschooling system and this video being about the real salient part of it is that it's one subject at a time, subject-driven education, is that you'll have your in-laws and your mom and your dad being like, so wait, why don't they know this yet? Like people are used to kids going in lockstep through the education system. And anytime you think outside of the box, you do something outside of the box to find a system that works for your family, you have to be prepared from the PR point of view, from public relations, to explain it to people. And we've seen this with our, with our family members. They'll take us aside and they'll be like, okay, I just talked to your 7th grader about,
Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
Who's Thomas Jefferson? Because
Right.
we don't go deep on American history until they get to 9th, 10th grade.
Yeah, and so there are definitely people who have met the Fulweilers and who would probably be like, do not listen to them on education because I asked their 7th grader about Thomas Jefferson and they didn't know. And so you have to be confident in your own vision and just be prepared with some answers so that when those kind of things come up, you can explain what you're doing. You can say, we're doing Joeschooling.
Yeah.
And a final note on that is, let's say, our kids hadn't hit American history because they hadn't gotten to that yet. If you do switch and suddenly you put them in a traditional education system, something happens, let's say even mid-semester, you can't keep up with homeschooling for some reason, so you throw them into the school system. We have found, and we have some experience with this, they catch up very quickly. You will be amazed at how well kids catch up. So if that's in the back of your mind, if you think, well, if we do one subject at a time, gosh, what would that even look like if we haven't even started this one subject and then mid-semester an emergency arose and they had to go to school? It's the first 6 weeks or 2 might be rough as they kind of get their sea legs with the new system. But I mean, over and over again, not just with our family, but with other families, we're just blown away by how quickly kids catch up.
Absolutely. And I can't speak for every school, of course, but if, let's say for some reason moved your kid in 10th grade to a high school and they had already taken chemistry in homeschool, but they hadn't taken biology, I think you can probably explain that to the administrators and get those courses switched because you did them in a different order. I don't think they're really going to miss. I can't think of a scenario where they're just going to completely miss out on a subject.
Yeah. I find that just knowing what you're doing, having a plan, being able to explain it kind of solves a lot, because educators, they are used to people who have done non-traditional schooling at this point. So if you can just sit down with the teachers and say, here's what we've been doing, here's where the gaps are going to be, could you work with us on this? Teachers are more than willing to help. I mean, I think that'll end up being a non-issue.
Yeah, and worst case scenario, let's say somehow biology got missed and they won't put your kid in the biology class. Do it over the summer. I mean, have them watch some courses, read some books, take a star test. You can do it in a month. I mean, so they'll get everything they need.
All right, if you found this helpful, like this video, leave a comment. We'll be watching comments, try to reply as much as we can. You can always contact me at thejfshow.com, thejfshow.com. And of course, follow me on Instagram. That is my favorite place to hang out. Jennifer Fulweiler is my handle over there. And be sure to subscribe because we will be back again with more videos.